Thanks, Andrea. Good morning and welcome to Bellingham Unitarian Fellowship. I'm Reverend Paul Beckel.
Good morning, beloved community. I'm Laura Lee Carboni. What a great opportunity to reflect on these beautiful native ancestral lands upon which we reside, and to recommit to stand in solidarity with our native neighbors, to safeguard their traditional lands, waters, and sacred sites, as we work to create and promote racial equity, intercultural competency, diversity, and inclusion. As we light our own chalices, I'd like to share this reading from Kimberly Carson called A Place of Belonging and Caring. It is not by chance that you arrived here today. You have been looking for something larger than yourself. Inside of you, there is a yearning, a calling, a hope for more, a desire for a place of belonging and caring. Through your struggles, someone nurtured you into being, instilling a belief in a shared purpose, a common yet precious resource that belongs to all of us when we share. And so you began seeking a beloved community, a people that does not put fences around love, a community that holds its arms open to possibilities of love, a heart home to nourish your soul and share your gifts. Welcome home. Welcome to worship. Now, please join me in reciting our BUF covenant. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service gives it life. Celebrating our diversity and joined by a quest for truth, we work for peace and honor all creation. This is our covenant.
Good morning, I'm Kevin Allen Schmidt, and I ask you to take out your gray hymn book and turn it to 188 for the song, Come, Come, Whoever You Are. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Let's do it as a round. I'll start and then I'll point at you and you can start. Ready? Here I go. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. One more time. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. And now let's take our teal hymn books and turn to 1008, 1008, when our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell mysteries from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words. Then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place. We are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place. When we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place. We are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place.
Thanks, Kevin. The phrase beloved community was coined in the early 20th century by theologian Josiah Rice, who founded the Fellowship of Reconciliation. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who became a member of the Fellowship of Reconciliation many years later, popularized the phrase and invested it with a deeper meaning, which has captured the imagination of people of goodwill all over the world. In his 1963 sermon, Loving Your Enemies, Dr. King addressed the role of unconditional love in struggling for the beloved community. With every ounce of our energy, we must continue to rid this nation of the incubus of segregation, he said. But we shall not, in the process, relinquish our privilege and our obligation to love. While abhorring segregation, we shall love the segregationist. This is the only way to create the beloved community. Did you catch that? He said, we shall not in the process relinquish our privilege and our obligation to love. Much too often, encouragement to love comes across in a voice that is pushy, preachy in the worst sense, with overtones of shaming. You must love. But as King preached and prophesied, the opportunity to love is a privilege. We get to love. Thank you for joining us today. All month, our theme for Sunday services has been Beloved Community. Now, February is almost behind us, but the prospects for beloved community lie ahead.
Okay, hi, I'm Laura Lee back again, and I'm going to share my screen and read a children's story. And this is called Not My Idea, a book about whiteness. And this is written and illustrated by Anastasia Higginbotham, who writes books about topics that are sometimes difficult to talk about. And she uses collage as her art, which is a very powerful art form. Okay, here we go. Here we see the TV on in this house, and they've just announced a police shooting of a black man. Mom says, oh no, not again. When grown-ups try to hide scary things from kids. What, Mom, what? Not again? It's usually because they're scared too.
Laura Lee, you're not flipping the pages.
Oh, Thank you. Okay, there we go.
Not quite yet.
Yeah. There we go. Oh, still not. Okay. Ooh, why aren't I? Okay, slideshow. Okay, why isn't this going? Sorry, folks.
At the bottom of the screen you've got, if you slide down, there you go.
Okay. It's just not flipping through the slides for some reason. Oh,
Yeah, try the space key on your keyboard.
space key. I'm flipping through on my screen, but on the shared screen, it's just not. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and try this again. Okay. Okay, let's see if this goes. Beginning. Current slide. Oh. Oh boy, isn't technology great? Let's see. I'm gonna try this again. Oh, it's working perfectly on my screen, but not on the share screen.
If you go down to the bottom there, you'll see very faintly. There you go.
Okay, I'm gonna do it over there then. All right. Okay. Oh, now I don't, oh, okay. Okay, what, Mom? What? Not again. Usually because grown-ups are scared too. Who is that with their hands up? Why is that policeman screaming at him? Oh boy, she's listening to the TV and Mom is about to turn that TV off. Mom says, you don't need to worry about this. You're safe. Understand? Our family doesn't see color. Our family is kind to everyone. Deep down, we all know color matters. Skin color makes a difference in how the world sees you and in how you see the world. Here they are going into a store. There's a security card there. It makes a difference in how much trouble seems to find you or let you be. Notice who the security guard is keeping an eye on. In stores, in cars, on sidewalks, at school, your skin color affects the most ordinary daily experiences, including which neighborhoods welcome you. So relieved you got here safely. Why wouldn't we? The protests. I think that's the grandma at home there. And the TV's on and They're talking about the shooting, and Grandpa remarks, they're blocking the road, meaning the protesters. You may get the message that racism is happening only to Black and brown people. Racism is a white person's problem, and we are all caught up in it. Grandma says, I can't watch the news. Mom says, that police officer was just doing his job. Mostly by refusing to look at it. Come away from the TV now. Look, I made your favorite. You can face this. Understanding the truth takes courage, especially a painful truth about your own people, your own family. Here they are back in the car. She doesn't look all right, does she? Even people you love may behave in ways that show they think they are the good ones. She sees Mom clutching her wallet and hears the door lock as they drive by an area where there are people of color. Racism was not your idea. You don't need to defend it. You can bring your curiosity to learn about it and see that it's true. Here they are in their public library. She's looking up some US history. Many white people did things they never would have done, should have done. Denying opportunities, denied housing, denied voting rights. Many other white people failed to see the problem with this, exploiting the love and labor of Black women. These choices put wealth and power into white hands, homes, and neighborhoods. Some white people joined the leaders of Black liberation. Liberation equals love plus freedom. And there are the Grimke sisters, Julian Bond, and members of SNCC, and Nina Simone, nuns and fellow marchers, John Lewis, Colin Kaepernick. Racism is still happening. It keeps changing and keeps being the same. And yet, just being here, alive in this moment, you have a chance to care about this, to connect. But connecting means opening, and opening sometimes feels like breaking. Mom, I don't feel good. Uh-oh, should I pull over? I need to know what's going on. What are you talking about? Why didn't anybody teach me real history? I do see color. I see yours, mine, and everybody's. You can't hide what's right in front of me. I know what that police officer did was wrong. Go with your instincts on this one. Racial justice is possible. Okay, geez, you don't have to yell, but only if we're honest with each other and ourselves. I see a playground over there. Want to get some air? Yeah. Your history's not all written yet. What do you want it to say? The end. This book also has some great activities at the end. It's available at our public library or from BUF. Contact Genia if you'd like to check it out.
Thanks a lot, Laura Lee. I'd like to invite you all now to relax. Find yourself connected to one another, breathing easily, connected to the earth, feeling the energy of the earth which carries our connection, that which holds us all together from one to the next. Relax and envision your connection with all that is, the source and the unfolding of which we are all a part. Beloved community, as originally conceived, includes but is not limited to small groups such as ours, no matter how well we get along. Rather, it's a vision of global brotherhood and sisterhood. Beloved community is not a vision for one oppressed group, but for all people. So as we strive to widen our circle at BUF, we can commit ourselves to justice and inclusion in all aspects of society for our Lummi neighbors, Punjabi and Hispanic neighbors. Beloved community is not primarily about race or class, though these are areas of vital learning and action for us. It's not just about age or identity or ability, education, documentation, or having the right connections. It's not about being in the same Zoom meetings or in the same physical building, but about making our entire society sanctuary, which takes countless forms. It's not about a religious affiliation or non-affiliation, and yet we'll never overcome our distrust as long as our religious creeds or practices reinforce our divisions. Dr. King often said, "I have fought too long and hard against segregated public accommodations to end up segregating my moral concerns. Justice is indivisible." Unitarian Universalists proclaim no exclusive religious creed. We find that creeds unnecessarily divide us from one another. But what about our practices? What might we do without thinking to carry forward echoes of superiority and exclusion? I'm sharing these questions in the form of a meditation because they are challenging, maybe distressing. And if we're going to have the courage to confront them again and again, even as inner and outer signs of progress remain inconclusive. We will need to know how to quiet ourselves. We will need to practice, ground ourselves, draw on the strength of higher principles and deepening practices and awareness that we are all one, and a commitment to bring that oneness into our lives. One way we do this is by sharing the milestones, the joys, the sorrows, all of the feelings and anxieties and celebrations that really shape our lives from day to day, sharing these with each other. So I invite you now to put any of these things and brief phrases in the chat. And I'll read these off to the extent that I can keep up. So you don't need to read along. Of course, you're welcome. But you also can close your eyes and just feel your connection and embrace of everybody who's sharing. I also ask that unless you are certain that they would be okay with you doing so, make sure you're not sharing anything private. And so go ahead and share. Allow us to pray together. Sadness at the 1-year anniversary of my nephew's suicide. Joy for goddaughter Liz recovery from COVID and malaria. Grateful for those who say yes to the needs of others. I am celebrating being celibate. I feel liberated. I thank you. I don't know how we pronounce G1D. One God. Joy and gratitude. The well-being of parishioners' families. Glad to have gotten the vaccine, and there seems to be increased availability in Whatcom County. Daffodils and crocuses starting to bloom. Hooray for spring. We can see it, we can feel it. We can know it's coming. Birdsong and pussy willows. Saw these really big pussy willows on the way to BUF this morning. Nearly 1 year since shelter in place. And an appointment for a COVID shot. My broham and sisham. And for all the truths of our lives that we feel but don't know how to articulate. We might be able to put into words, but we're not ready to share. For the most frightening and the most difficult to share, let us embrace each other, knowing that each of us is going to go through the ups and downs, and how incredibly fortunate we are to have one another in our lives.
Good morning. My name is Kara Black. This reading shares a lesson I was given on white supremacy and some things I learned from it. When I was in college, I had an inspiring plan for my future. I was going to start a summer program for 7th and 8th grade inner city low-income children. This program would be set in a beautiful natural spot, include fun introductions to outdoor adventure, provide lively introductions to high school academic topics, and offer self-esteem and skill building activities. I proudly shared this plan in my first semester social work class with Jewel Graham at Antioch College. I quickly noticed that the encouraging expressions I was expecting were absent. Rather, I was faced with a circle of scornful faces and disdain. Questions came. Where are the parents in this plan of yours? Where is the community? And more, which I was only able to understand and absorb over time. Yes, I'd been looking at the problem with a white savior mentality. I was going to step in and lift up these poor children of color, my unaware supremacy and superiority at work. I hadn't thought about the parents or community of these children, except perhaps to think that they hadn't done a great job. I'm chagrined when I remember my thinking then. This abrupt and invaluable educational moment shifted my efforts to family support and then to strength-oriented community support. My main justice focus now is on removing barriers set up and reinforced by my own dominant group that interfere with families and communities doing the work they are fully capable and eminently qualified to do without white or middle upper class or fill in the dominant blank folks doing it for them. I began following the agenda of people of color in my justice work, doing what was asked of me. Even while I work in the background, I believe that I'm sometimes able to help affect significant change. At the request of leaders of color, I've sent letters, marched, held protest signs, housed people, made purchase decisions, led racism healing groups for white people, listened a lot, bought emergency supplies, brought emergency supplies, sent money, and given feedback to organizations and systems that I'm part of. Of course, any given person can be part of multiple dominant groups, such as men, white people, USers, upper middle class folks, etc., and or multiple non-dominant groups, such as people of color, people raised low income, LGBTQ folks, folks with physical disabilities, etc. I think it's generally good policy for anyone from a dominant group who is working to correct an injustice affecting a non-dominant group to follow the lead of the non-dominant group, starting with a fundamental respect for each group's ability to think best about itself and its own needs. 37 years after Jewel Graham's class and the shifts I've made in my path, I continue to work on my own supremacy patterns and develop self-awareness. No doubt in a few years, I'll look back at what I'm reading you today and see several blind spots. So for me and for many of us from dominant groups, this is lifelong work. We can find positive support in this work in many sources, from Black Lives Matter programs, to listening and healing circles, to participation in our partnerships, to curricula like Widening the Circle, just to name a few. I think helpful support is rooted in recognizing the goodness of each and every one of us. Such support helps those of us from dominant groups move forward humbly and openly without using shame, blame, or humiliation. I encourage those of us at BUF who are part of dominant groups to work to remove any savior lenses we may have as we move ahead to implement our covenant of beloved community. Rather, I suggest that our work be first, self-examination, second, removal of institutional barriers that further inequity or interfere with communities and families caring for themselves in their own best way. Third, following the lead of those in non-dominant groups in both our hands-on basic need as well as structural change justice work. And finally, fourth, humbly building mutually respectful, mutually beneficial, enjoyable relationships with people from groups different from our own. Thank you to those who reviewed drafts of this essay. I look forward to hearing more thoughts and experiences of others on this topic. Thank you all for your time, attention, and care. With love to you.
Good morning, and thank you, Kara, for your wonderful leadership in this very difficult subject. My name is Barbara Gilday. I'm a member of the Black Lives Matter team. I'm a person who likes to be active, to bring people together and resources together, and to find creative ways to level the playing field. Teaching in Ghana and creating programs with families in inner city schools in Seattle have sensitized me to the need to create opportunities for disadvantaged and minority students to go to college. And so when Tom Kirshner mentioned his interest in research into Call Me Mister, an organization that supports Black men through teachers' colleges and into their careers, we talked and brainstormed. The current dropout rate is 5 times greater for Black male teachers than it is for whites. Scholarships and support structures are making a difference in that rate. One thing led to another. I reached out to a couple of African-American teachers in town to get their perspectives, which led to contacts with Western, which led to a small group of creative, energetic buffsters coming together, and synergy happened. Tom shared his desire to get more African-American teachers in the classroom. His plan is to support one student through a 4-year program, graduating debt-free. Tom would share the reports of his progress with our congregation, but his dream is much bigger than that. He'd like to see us present the findings of this student program to GA and get other UU churches involved. With 819 UU churches in the US at $500 a church, that would be $400,000 to support 20 African-American teachers a year. Is this an impossible dream? Well, you probably know the saying, if you shoot for the moon and miss, you're still out in the stars. But if you shoot for the barn door and miss, well, we won't go there. Ellie and Alan Freeberg were in the same meeting and had a different idea. They looked at our 8th principle carefully. We covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. Ellie and Alan's vision is to find ways not only to support students at Western, but to involve members of our congregation, a win-win situation. They've been directed by Damani Johnson, 2 professors who've created a new program, a social justice minor within the Woodring College of Education. We had a most animated conversation with them last week and brainstormed numerous ideas. Just 3 of those ideas. 1, tutoring and mentoring students in Shuckson Middle School in a program that was started by one of the Western students, one of the Western minority students, by the way. 2, using the congregation's many years of experience and context to connect students with people and resources they might not otherwise be able to access. And 3, a competition among the students to award a fellowship to a student who creates a program with youth that encourages the dismantling of racism and other oppressions. These ideas generally focus on minority and first-generation students who otherwise might not have the emotional or financial support to further their education. We'll have a follow-up meeting this week to continue our exploration of what we think would be a good place to start. If you'd like more information or would like to join our intrepid little group, please contact me, Barbara Gilday. I'm in the directory. Thanks.
Thanks, Barbara. And Andrea, could you take this opportunity now to share with us the interlude you picked out and maybe describe the origin of the song? Are you frozen there? I think Andrea's frozen. Oh, shoot.
Do you want me to go?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Jania.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Genia Allen Schmidt, the Director of Lifelong Learning here at BUF. I will never forget when, about 4 years ago, I read an article in the UUA World explaining how our church was complicit in white supremacy. It totally blew my mind, and I remember throwing the magazine down. I was filled with disbelief and denial and anger and dismay. I just couldn't believe that this church that I loved being a part of could be a part of systemic racism. Well, I've read a lot, I've learned a lot, I've grown a lot since then. And I have come to believe that the only way for our church to heal and move forward is for us, all of us, to learn about, to name, and to acknowledge the harm that our church has done and change the way we do things. It's a pretty big task, but fortunately, we have a guidebook called Widening the Circle of Concern. Widening the Circle is a report that was just published, conducted by the UUA Commission for Institutional Change. And it was based on hundreds of interviews, documents, and hard data collected over the last 3 years. It's a pretty sobering, painful account of where we've gone wrong and full of recommendations of actions we need to take to become a beloved community. The report isn't just a downer, it is also filled with hope, inspiration, and a reminder of the power of humility and grace, and the church we want to be and can become. So BUF is launching a study group of this report next Sunday, along with congregations all across the country. And we invite you to join us. This 11-week series will be from 8:30 to 10 o'clock on Sunday mornings, starting next week, and will be led by Reverend Paul, Reverends Rose Eddington and Mel Hoover, and me. Our sessions will be really engaging and dynamic, filled with processing, questioning, and sharing. And we will end with concrete recommendations for action. If you would like to be a part of this, please let me know by tomorrow and I'll order you a book. And you can contact me at genia@buf.org, and I'll go ahead and put that in the chat box. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Jania. For Dr. King, the beloved community was not a lofty utopian goal in which lions and lambs coexist in idyllic harmony. He saw beloved community as a realistic, achievable goal that could be attained by a critical mass of people committed to and trained in the philosophy and methods of nonviolence. And along the way, we get to love. Separation, hatred, selfishness, and exploitation are not required for our survival. This is a difficult time, a time of fear and loss, financial instability leading to homelessness and hunger, the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer again and again on top of all the other times of crisis when inequality has separated us. We're moving still further from the point where everyone has the bare minimum needed to survive. It's in this context that we have promised to one another at BUF to journey toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural community. We make this promise in confidence that with our allies in other UU congregations, our allies in the broader faith community, our allies in activism, our allies in voting, our allies in generosity, our allies in education, environmental sustainability, public policy making, and public safety, we will continue this journey toward dismantling racism and other oppressions. We will be able to progress, and when we do not, we will be able to humbly hold one another accountable. We will have the courage to recognize within ourselves and our institutions the beliefs and practices of racial and cultural superiority that hold us back. And we will commit to negotiating our internal differences to ensure that we can keep moving forward together. Dr. King's beloved community was not devoid of interpersonal, group, or international conflict. Instead, he recognized that conflict was an inevitable part of human experience. But he believed that conflicts could be resolved peacefully and adversaries could be reconciled through a mutual determined commitment to nonviolence. Problems that we have created together have to be solved together. In the early days of desegregation, a town that had been ordered to allow Black children to use the public pool decided that the only way to prevent this was to fill the entire pool with concrete. Racism hurts everyone. It's easy to point at the follies of others, but how many ways do we do this here and now? Pretending that we can ignore oppressions perpetuated by others or suffering experienced by others. Pretending that we can step outside the inescapable network of mutuality among the human family. In the coming weeks, we'll explore more about this and what it means to speak truth to power. But for now, since that may start to seem like a cliche, let's just acknowledge that power doesn't always listen. Power often ignores the truth when it's brought before them. So then what? Do we give up? Do we resort to violence? Do we just hammer away in ways that are ineffective and just let it be, not making impact? King and Gandhi envisioned and implemented some brilliant alternatives. Brilliant not because they led to short-term wins, but because they could be repeated generation after generation, because they're grounded in soul force, ethical uses of power. Now, their strategies will not work in different applications. A lot of them won't work today. We'll always need to devise new strategies to keep evil off balance. But the principles of nonviolence are accepting the consequences of our disruptions to the status quo. That remains essential. And we'll figure out how to do that together and come up with some new ways to be disruptive and to take the consequences for that, to make change effectively. Just for now, I invite you to consider the location of power that isn't listening. Is that location maybe within ourselves that's not listening, that's not able to hear? The power that has not been willing to see, the power that has not had the courage to see truth when it's right in front of us, nor to understand its own strength. I invite you to consider how we might continue to uncover and own our power. Own our power by seeing truth. Own our power in ethical ways, in ways that promote the beloved community, but don't become the oppressors. Repeat their strategies and make us become as oppressive as anyone else because we're afraid, we're frustrated. Right now, I want to introduce my colleagues Mel Hoover and Rose Eddington, who will be sharing their own insights and experiences with us as we journey forward. Mel and Rose and I were once part of the same UU district when they were in West Virginia and I was in the Cleveland area. I'm so happy to have them living now here in Bellingham and grateful to them for their ongoing commitment to teach and to learn with us. Mel, Rose.
Good morning. We want to thank Genia and Paul for their commitment to anti-racism, to BUF, and to our faith for initiating Widening the Circle of Concern.
And we also want to thank Genia and Paul for reaching out and asking for our involvement in co-leading this study with them. We're excited by Widening the Circle because it is designed to transform ourselves and our faith from talking about beloved community to actually figuring out what it takes to be a real, live, actualized beloved community.
As retired UU ministers, we're excited because in our 50 years of ministry, separately and jointly, we've always been committed to the ideals and practices of anti-racism, anti-oppression, and multiculturalism, and we are grateful to be able to continue our commitment here in our new congregation.
Yes, until recently, we lived more on the Atlantic Ocean side of the country. Well, several years ago, our now adult daughter, Melanie, informed us we had raised her on the wrong coast. So she moved to Seattle, fell in love with Winston Lou, and blessed us with Brighton, our granddaughter. They moved to Redmond and hinted that it would really be nice to have family closer. Bellingham looked like the place for us. We'd spent a great week here way back in 1983 as delegates to the Biennial Assembly of the World Council of Churches, shuttling to meetings between Bellingham and Vancouver. In more recent years, we've visited the Tanhos, and while house sitting for them in fall 2019, visited BUF, bought a house, and had a great get together with the UU ministers and spouses here. We looked forward to having instant community with our colleagues and taking part in a vibrant, active congregation. We were all set to move in early 2020.
Then that great disruptor known as COVID-19 virus struck. We finally just got here in August. But thanks to Zoom, we've been able to tune into services, committee meetings, coffee hours, the annual meeting, and to say we're greatly impressed with the 8th principle process BUF did and your adoption of the covenant of beloved community. It makes us feel right at home in the shared effort to transform our faith. We are all now well aware of how disruptive and life-threatening COVID-19 is, always lurking around, waiting to find a host where it can spread and mutate. Since January 6th, we are all more aware of the societal virus of racism, of white supremacy and culture. We also know that racism sometimes passes in more polite ways, subtle forms within our own faith, in fact, and in our personal lives, where whatever our ethnic identity. Racism, anti-Blackness, and white supremacy culture all go together, hand in hand, and cannot be ignored. The UUA learned that yet again in 2017, when we had a white supremacy cultural disruption over a UUA hiring practice that showed that we still need to deal with the virus of racism within our faith. Our UUA president resigned, the UUA board appointed a team of 3 co-presidents and initiated the Commission on Institutional Change that gives us today Widening the Circle. Now, the good news that came out of this dealing is that we are challenges and that UUs we know are up to the challenge and want to change. We want to change. We want to vaccinate ourselves and as much of our society as we can against racism by creating together beloved community.
Historically, we UUs thought we were helping to create beloved community back when some UUs marched with Dr. King in Selma, which was a necessary and brave gesture of solidarity in the 1960s, but was not a program. It wasn't enough. We've had other longtime anti-racism efforts, such as Jubilee World and Journey Toward Wholeness, that has helped us get to today, to now, when we know we can't go back to politeness or fear or trying to assume that we have no problem with racism. Time and experience have let us know that we need to dismantle anti-Blackness, white supremacy culture, and racism. We need to, we must, we can. We all have to ask ourselves, do we have the will, the love, and the grace? We have all inherited the virus of racism. It's part of our nation's DNA, although its impacts have not been equally experienced. In order for us to become immune to racism, we will all have to figure out anti-racism together as we make the journey to beloved community.
So what will beloved community be like for you?
What will beloved community be like for BUF?
And what will it be like for Unitarian Universalism when congregations share their journeys?
Let's start finding out. We are all responsible for spreading immunity to the virus of racism.
Through the study group that will meet on Sunday mornings.
Through acting on reports from the study group.
And through the choices we make every day in our lives. All are welcome to join in widening the circle of concern. Amen, amen, amen.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rose, Mel. I'm so looking forward to working with you. And to clarify, this is a series of classes that we'll be doing this spring, but that doesn't mean only the people who are able to get involved in these classes are part of our efforts. We'll be putting study materials in the midweek update, and I know that so many people at BUF are already in so many different ways educating themselves, sometimes through books and words, and sometimes from the actual experience of engaging with the wider community. racial justice and facing the reality of all types of oppressions. So we'll be doing this again or something similar in the fall, and then in the next spring, and then the next fall. And sometimes it'll be programs, and sometimes it'll be spontaneous things that we just need to address. This is not the beginning of the struggle, and it won't be the end. Unitarian Universalists have been seeking racial justice and reconciliation for ages. Why? Because our principles have no meaning if we're looking for nothing more here than the freedom to be left alone, to think whatever we want to think. This is hard work, and there have been so many setbacks. There is so much that we don't understand, but we are learning and gaining momentum together as a UU movement allied with many others. And in the meantime, we get to love, we get to experience generosity, including through our own acts of generosity, our own acts of building beloved community everywhere we can, and in building community here among ourselves. Doing this with financial contributions and in all the acts of love that we may imagine. So for the financial contributions, please consider now, Andrea is going to play a offertory piece, and during that time you can go to your phones and use the Give Plus app. You can go to buf.org and hit the donate button in the upper right hand corner and use PayPal or credit card. Or you can write a check to BUF at 1207 Ellsworth Street and just mail it in the usual way. So thank you in advance. Not just in advance, thank you for all the ways you have already been generous, and thank you in advance.
This is Ufi number 3 by Nigerian composer Christian Onyeji.
Thank you, Andrea. And now let's finish with our closing hymn, 1028 in the Teal Hymn Book, 1028, The Fire of Commitment. From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our ways, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our ways, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our minds and souls ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our ways, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
You have an opportunity in just a few minutes to start to build beloved community by sticking around a little bit longer, meeting in the small groups that Zoom will divide us into, and getting to know one another. So just stay after the postlude and the circle round. And throughout the week, you can find out what's going on at BUF by reading our midweek update, which you can find at buf.org. Also on buf.org, you can find the order of service for every Sunday. And on today's order of service, there are more announcements about what's going on at BUF, including tomorrow night, our monthly Taizé service with Reverend Tessie Mandeville and pianist Andrea Rackle. The Zoom link will also be in the midweek update and buf.org. Same with, so the Taizé service is at 7 tomorrow night. And right before that at 6 is the BUF Black Lives Matter meeting. The link for that meeting as well can be found in the midweek update. Let's extinguish our chalices now. A frustrated teacher once turned to a recalcitrant student, and tearing up a map of the world, she said to him, "Sit over there and put this back together." He returned just a few minutes later with the project completed. Stunned, the teacher asked, "How did you do that?" "Oh, well, there was a picture of a person on the other side," he said. I looked at it from the other side, put the person back together again, and then that made the world whole again. Let's circle around for freedom.